Hey scholars, so in the last video we installed Castle Game Engine. In this video we are going to start playing with it, and by the end we should have a simple game like this. Let's open up the engine here, and we're going to create a new project, and make sure you choose your All Projects Pascal folder. Click Empty Project. There are starter projects here for 3D and 2D, but we're going to start from scratch. We're going to call this Demo Shooter game, and here we'll use the project caption shooter. When you start up your project, you'll notice that your project is organized into different views that the user or the player sees. By default, we have a view already created here called main. If you click on it, you'll see a couple sections. You have file dialogues up here. We have a hierarchy right here, which shows the components of your tree-like structure, all the objects organized in a structure. If you click on any of the items on the other side of here, the right with the properties and also the events inside the inspector. Now, Castle Gaming Engine, or CGE, doesn't let you add events yet. You can see there's a note here, and this current version, when we actually set up the events, we'll do it in code, but you can change some of the properties of the objects in your game. In the middle, you have the viewport, basically what your game will look like. You can think of this as like a canvas for your designs. What you see here is what you'll get in your game, or that's also abbreviated WYSIWYG in computer science. And on the bottom here, you have access to messages when we actually start to run the game, when we start to compile the game, and also access to all the files. So once we are finished doing design work, we will come down here to actually do some edits of the code that will bring our game to life. All right, so those are the four main sections. Up here, you also have, for the viewport, some selectors, and as we are designing, I might use some of these selectors to interact with the elements in our game. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do is actually add some elements to our hierarchy over here. Click on this, or you can do it up here and just go to edit and add. You add an interface, and down here you have viewport. So this is a 3D viewport, and I opened to actually show you something. If you remember when we worked on Blender, and actually I will open up Blender really quickly. We have a camera here, and we have our cube, and if you don't remember this, it's okay. I'm just trying to show you how CGE works very similarly. There's a cube, and when we render things out, we basically just see things through the vantage point of the cameras that we set up. Castle Gaming Engine basically works in a very similar way. As you can see, there's a camera there. The interface is a little more sparse than Blender, which is why I opened it up. There's a camera here, and then we have an object there. We are going to make a 2D game, and I can show you what that looks like inside of Blender as well, because you can do 2D animation inside of Blender. So if we go to 2D animation, we mostly worked in 3D animation, but there's the ability to do 2D animation. So if I create a shape here and press enter, I can make it whatever. But the way that we're doing 3D animation isn't really changing the way that it works. We're just limiting what the user can see. So we're looking through a camera right now at a flat surface. All right, so if we change perspective by switching from draw mode to object mode, and I move the widget, you can see we're actually looking through the camera at a flat plane, and that's how we achieve 2D effect. You get to the camera there, and it's very similar to what we're going to do inside of CGE. So I switch back camera, you can see that's the flat plane. So let me close this and jump back over to CGE. So you can see now that the viewport that we're using is a 3D viewport. We're going to actually delete this. I only created it for demonstration or explanatory purposes. So delete the viewport. What you're going to do is add a new viewport. Make sure you do 2D, okay? And here we're looking through the camera, and our game will be in the middle. And you'll also notice that a couple things were created. A items root transform, and under that we have camera. Then we have a panel that was created here, and you could click here on scale and scale it this way. You could also rotate it, move it, and select it. Now I'll just select the camera, and I want you to change the name to just camera. You can do that over here in the inspector. You could have also done it over here in the hierarchy panel. Okay, and we are going to actually delete this panel. So delete. We're going to add a new one. So click on items, then add transforms, and we're going to add a new, not a panel, plane. Okay, and we are going to call this GreenSquare. And over here, to make it green, in the inspector, we will turn off blue and we will turn off red. But you can see that you still can't see it. And there are two reasons for that. We need to remember we're working in a 3D space. We need to change it so that its axis is 2. And then we also need to change the size because right now, technically it's only 2 by 2. So we're going to make the size 100 by 100. Okay. Now, the last thing that we need to do, you'll notice that it's not green like we said. And that's because the material that we're using requires a light. It tries to represent a real object in the digital space. So things that don't have lights cast upon them, you can't see. But we can change the material that it's made out of. Instead of being physical, we can change it to PM unlit, and you can actually see the color and work with lights later on. Okay. I want you to change the viewport as well. So you click on the viewport and we're going to change the color of that, the background color. And let's go 0, 0, 0 to black. And I'm going to show you one more thing with our game object here, our GreenSquare. You will see translation here. The translation is basically where an object is in the space. Remember, we're working with 3 dimensions. In a 2D game, we mostly will only change the X and the Y coordinate. You'll notice here that it's set to 0, 0, 0. Unlike the coordinate system when we wrote games in Python with Pygame, the origin in a CGE game is not here at the top corner. It's actually in the middle of the world, and that's because, again, we're working with the 3D space. So if we actually do this, you'll notice the X and Y are changing, but the Z is not. Now that we've set up the basics of at least the demo part of our game, what we're going to do is actually start editing the code. So there are actually 2 files in here, game initialize and also gameviewmain. Gameviewmain is the code file that goes with this view that we're looking at. Remember, if we jump back and I can close this view, I'm going to save it and I'll ask you to save. I'm going to say yes. We only have one view. So click this again. And to go back to our one view, we're going to edit this file. The initialization file is for the entire program. We don't have to worry about, there's some settings in there that you might want to set down the road around window size and things like that. But right now we're not going to mess with that. So if you double click on this, it will actually open up Lazarus and we can start making edits to the code related to this view. So first we have some comments up here that are just auto-generated. We also have units that are also auto added for us. We have classes, which we saw before when we were in classes for our Lazarus programs, our GUI programs. We have castle vectors. We have castle serialize, castle controls, castle key mouse. We need to add a couple more. We need to add CastleViewport to our viewport. We need to add castle scene, castle form, and castle UI state. I think that's everything. We'll see when we actually try to run this. If we had errors, it might be that we haven't imported all the units that we need. All right, so we have our view here, our TCastleView, and you'll notice that something automatically published here, and that is, if we go to CGE, that is this label, which because it's below the viewport, you can't see it. So what we're going to do is actually pull it from here into the viewport by moving it there. Now you can see it again. It's also pretty small. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab it. I'm going to put it inside a view of our camera. And I'm also going to make the font size a little bit bigger. So I'm going to make it 40. And that'll draw frames per second. Actually, let's make it 35. It's a little big at 40. When you're troubleshooting how fast your game is running, by default, this will run at 60 frames per second, or it should run at 60. And you'll see how fast it actually is running compared to how fast it's supposed to be running based on the resources on your computer. All right, so let's go back. We are going to create a private in this class, and we're going to add GreenSquare, and that's going to be a TCastlePlane type, and then we're also going to add the MainViewport, and that's going to be a TCastleViewport type. Okay, there are some default procedures and constructors defined in this class. So you have the create constructor. So once the game is created, or once this view is created, you have the start procedure, the update procedure, and this runs every frame. So we don't have to have a game loop that we want to update. We can put inside of the update procedure. And also there is a function for when keys are pressed, which we aren't going to use right now, but we will use it when we actually create the full game. Right now, we're just going to do some simple animation. All right, so in the constructor, you'll notice that we are importing the configuration file for the main game view. In the start procedure, we're going to add some code. So find two variables here that will pull the information from the editor that we designed. So we're going to say GreenSquare is equal to DesignedComponent, and we are searching for GreenSquare. And this is going to be TCastlePlane. Copy this. We need the viewport, so paste that in. This is going to be TViewport, and going to be Viewport 1. Again, if we jump over here, that is the name of the viewport. If we changed it to something, then that is what we would have to reference inside of our code. And MainViewport. And again, these variable names are the variables that we defined up here in the private section. Okay, next, in the update procedure, we're going to add some more code. Don't delete the inherited because we need to inherit things from its parent. All right, and also don't delete this either. This is printing basically the frames per second in our game. But what we are going to do before we add code to the procedure is define a constant in some variables. So we're going to say const move speed. I said that's 200, and define some variables here. Say var. The first variable is new position, and this is a t vector pre-type, and viewport width. This is going to be a single. Okay. So first we need to grab the current position of our, actually I spelled width wrong here. width. All right, so the first thing to do is actually get the position of our game objects, so our square here, and save that in a variable. So we're going to get current position. We'll save that inside of the new position. New position is going to be equal to GreenSquare translation. And again, remember back here, translation is where the object is in the 3D space. But again, since we're doing a 2D game, only the X and Y is relevant in this game. So we're going to move the object. We're going to move it right by using new position. Now that we have the translations saved inside of a vector, we can get the X position. And what we're going to do is add to it. So you're going to say new position X plus move speed times seconds passed. So update runs every frame times per second, and seconds pass tells us how much time has passed. Multiplying it makes the movement smoother regardless of the frame rate. So we get seconds passed right here. Once this is called, this procedure is sent seconds passed, and also a handler for the input. All right, next, we want to make sure that we can still keep track of the cube as it keeps moving, because eventually it's going to get to the edge. What we want it to do is actually wrap around. We will add the code for that. So we want to first get the viewport width. We get that from MainViewport Camera.Orthographic.EffectiveWidth. And here you also need to have a semicolon at the end of this. Okay, now that we have the width, we can check to see whether or not the position is off of the screen. So f new position dot x is greater than the viewport width divided by 2. Remember, we're starting in the middle. So if it's greater than the viewport width divided by 2 plus 50, because we want to account for the size of the square. Then what we're going to do is set the new position dot x to minus viewport divided by 2 minus 50. Okay. Once we've done all that, we want to apply the new position to the square. So we'll say GreenSquare translation, and that'll be new position. Okay, that's pretty much it. Save this, actually close Lazarus. And assuming we don't have any typos, which is hopefully the case, but typing and explaining that sometimes happens, we can actually click here to run. Save this, and it'll start to compile. But this might take a minute on your machine. We're going to jump ahead to once it's done. Okay, so it looks like I had a typo somewhere. Looks like line 24. So let's jump back over to code. I spelled viewport wrong. Yes, I did. Viewport, save this. I am going to actually just jump over here instead of closing Lazarus, just in case there's more errors. The second time you try to compile it, second time you try to run this, it should run quicker, and we can see if there's other issues. Okay. Yes, I spelled this wrong as well, and orthographic as well. All right, so jump back over to the code. So designed should be component, designed component. Okay, other thing, orthographic, it's not spelled right. So down here, when we are grabbing the width of the camera, should be RTHO graphic. Okay, save this. You can jump back over to CGE, run it again, and it's working. So some basic animation here, running pretty smoothly. And now that you understand the basic interface for CGE, how it connects to the code, and the next video, what we will do is actually start controlling the square and start adding more game elements like these enemies and also these projectiles or lasers. All right, see you in the next one.